The heavy thud of my palm hitting the hood of the black sedan echoed through the rain-drenched alley like a gunshot. I had stepped off the curb blindly, my vision blurred by the final eviction notice in my hand. But as the car screeched to a halt inches from my shins, I didn't feel relief. I felt a surge of misplaced adrenaline-fueled rage. Before I could scream, the driver's door opened. A man emerged, tall, impeccably dressed in charcoal wool that seemed to repel the rain. He didn't come out swinging. He approached with a calm, predatory grace. "I am deeply sorry," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble. He reached out to steady me. "The storm, I didn't see you. Are you injured?" I slapped his hand away. My life was a wreckage of debt and failure, and he was the perfect target for my fury. "Sorry? You almost killed me." I stepped into his space, my voice cracking. He stayed silent, his frozen blue eyes searching mine with a stoic patience that felt like pity. "Nothing to say?" I let out a sharp, jagged laugh. "You sit there like a coward while you almost run people over. You're pathetic. Just a rich, empty suit with no spine." The air around us turned to ice. His patience vanished, replaced by a darkness that made the hair on my neck stand up. His gaze dropped to the final eviction notice I dropped on the wet asphalt. He stepped on the paper, pinning it down, his eyes scanning my name printed in bold ink. "Pathetic," James Vane repeated, and the kindness was gone. "Most people in this city are too afraid to even whisper my name, Mary. Yet you've decided to stand in the gutter and insult me." He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. "I was going to help you. Now I'm going to make you regret every word." I didn't know who James Vane was, not then. I watched him slide back into his car and drive away, leaving me soaked and shaking in the rain. I told myself I'd won, that I'd put some arrogant rich man in his place. I picked up what remained of my eviction notice and trudged back to my apartment. 3 years of trying to save my father's antique shop reduced to 72 hours before homelessness. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have taken my hand when I offered it. J.V." My blood turned cold. I stared at those initials, remembering the way he'd looked at me in that alley, the way he'd said my name like he was memorizing it. I deleted the message and tried to sleep, but every shadow in my apartment felt like it was watching. The next morning, everything started falling apart. My business partner, Marcus, called, panicked. The loan we'd been counting on had been pulled without explanation. The estate auction we had lined up was canceled. The antique dealer from Boston wouldn't return our calls. "Mary, what did you do?" Marcus's voice trembled. "Someone called my house last night, told me to distance myself from you if I knew what was good for me." I hung up and stared at my phone, understanding settling over me like ice water. James Vane wasn't just angry. He was systematic. Within 3 days, my life became unrecognizable. Marcus stopped answering my calls. The bank froze my accounts for a routine audit. My landlord changed the locks early and put my belongings on the curb. I stood in the street, staring at the boxes that contained my entire life, and felt something break inside me. But it wasn't despair. It was rage. I rented a motel room with cash and started making calls, trying to salvage what I could. Every door I knocked on was already closed. Every favor had mysteriously expired. James Vane had erased me from the city's memory with surgical precision. On the 4th night, walking back to the motel, I felt eyes on me, the prickling sensation of being watched. I turned, but saw nothing except shadows. The feeling followed me all the way to my door. Another text arrived. "Stop fighting, Mary. You're only making this harder on yourself." I threw my phone across the room and watched it shatter. But even broken, I could still feel his presence everywhere, an invisible hand tightening its grip around my throat. The invitation to the Whitmore Charity Gala arrived at the motel with my name in elegant script. I almost threw it away, but desperation made me reconsider. The gala would be full of wealthy investors who might not know I'd been blacklisted yet. One chance, one person willing to listen. I bought a consignment dress with my last emergency cash and walked into the Whitmore Hotel ballroom like I belonged there. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. I forced myself to smile, to mingle, to pretend. I was talking to a venture capitalist who seemed genuinely interested when the room shifted. People turned toward the entrance, conversations dying mid-sentence. I followed their gazes and felt my blood freeze. James Vane had just walked in. He moved through the crowd like a king, people parting without being asked. He took his seat at the head table, the place of honor. The venture capitalist I had been talking to went pale. "Excuse me," he muttered, disappearing before I could stop him. If you can't stand people who use their power to crush those beneath them, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Type, "Nobody deserves that." Because what happened next only got worse. I stood alone in the crowd and understood. This wasn't an opportunity, it was a trap. James had sent that invitation knowing I'd come desperate and hoping, only to watch him own the room. Our eyes met across the ballroom. He raised his glass to me, a cold smile playing at his lips. "You can't escape me." I slipped out onto a private balcony, needing air that didn't taste like humiliation. The night was cold, but it felt clean after the suffocating ballroom. "Running away again?" His voice came from behind me, and I spun to find James blocking the doorway. He'd followed me. "I'm not running." He stepped onto the balcony and closed the door, trapping us. "You're drowning, Mary. No money, no home, no future." He moved closer until I backed against the railing. "And yet, you still have that fire in your eyes. Stay away from me. I don't think you understand your position." He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, dark and expensive. "I insulted you, publicly, in this city. That's not something people survive. Then why am I still alive?" His smile could cut. "Because I'm not interested in killing you, Mary. I'm interested in owning you." He pulled out a folded document. "A contract. You'll live in my estate, be available when I require your presence. In exchange, I'll clear your debts and restore your reputation." "You want me to be your prisoner?" "I want you to pay for your disrespect with your time." He held out the contract. "Sign it, or spend the rest of your life watching everything you touch turn to ash." If you believe that no one should be forced to surrender their freedom for survival, hit that subscribe button. People like James won't, and you need to hear what I did about it. I thought of my father's shop, his legacy in ruins. I thought of that motel room and having nothing left. My hands trembled as I took the contract and signed my name. James folded it carefully and tucked it away. "Welcome to your new life, Mary. I'll have someone collect you tomorrow." He paused at the door. "And Mary,
Don't mistake this for mercy. This is possession.
James's estate was a fortress of glass and steel, surrounded by high walls and cameras. A driver collected me from the motel at 8 sharp, loading my 3 boxes without a word. When the gates opened, I felt like I was being swallowed whole. Inside was as cold as I'd imagined. Minimalist furniture in grays and whites, marble floors that echoed, windows that felt more like being on display than offering a view. Mrs. Chin, the house manager, showed me to my room. It was elegant and spacious, decorated in creams and golds, with a king bed and soaking tub. It was nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived. It made my skin crawl. "Mr. Vane expects you for dinner at 7. Dress appropriately." Mrs. Chin left before I could respond. At 7, I found James in a formal dining room that could seat 20, but held only 2. He didn't look up when I arrived. "Sit." A server filled my plate with exquisite food that tasted like ashes. James cut his steak with surgical precision. "You'll have free run of the house during the day, but you will not leave the grounds without my permission. You will attend social functions with me when required. You will be pleasant and charming to my associates. And what do I get? Your debts cleared by month's end. Your father's shop returned to you. Your reputation restored." He finally looked at me, those blue eyes assessing. "And you get to keep that fire you're so proud of. I have no interest in breaking you, Mary, just containing you." You can't contain fire. It either burns out or burns everything down. For the first time since that night in the rain, something flickered in his expression. Not anger, hunger. We'll see. The first week tested both our wills. James was gone most days, but every evening he appeared for dinner, expecting me to play civilized captive. I complied because I had no choice, but I didn't make it easy. I questioned everything, challenged his assumptions, refused to be demure. Strangely, he allowed it, more than allowed. He seemed to enjoy our verbal sparring, the way I pushed back when everyone else probably agreed with everything he said. But there were rules, lines I wasn't supposed to cross. It happened during one of his dinner parties. James had invited associates, men in expensive suits with cold eyes. I was expected to sit beside him and smile. I made it through cocktails before the rage became too much. One associate, Vincent, made a comment about women knowing their place. The table laughed. James said nothing, just watched me with calculating eyes, waiting. I set down my wine glass carefully. "You know what I think, Vincent? Men who need to remind everyone of their power are usually compensating for having very little of it." Silence. Vincent's face turned red. The temperature dropped. "Mary," James said quietly, a warning. I stood, my chair scraping. "If you'll excuse me, I've lost my appetite." I turned, but my elbow caught my plate. It slid off the table and shattered against the marble, porcelain exploding everywhere. The sound echoed like a gunshot. No one moved. "Everyone out," James said softly, but with absolute authority. The associates scattered. When we were alone, James walked over to where I stood among broken porcelain. I expected rage. Instead, he looked at me with something that made my breath catch. Fascination. "You're the only person who's ever made me feel something other than contempt. Do you understand how dangerous that makes you?" He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Clean up this mess. And Mary, next time you want to break something, make sure it's not something I value." He walked away, leaving me with my heart pounding and the distinct feeling he wasn't talking about the plate. Everything changed when Marcus showed up at the gates at 2 in the morning. I heard Mrs. Chen's panicked voice and ran downstairs to find James already pulling on his jacket. "Stay here," he ordered, but I followed him outside. Marcus was at the gates, barely standing. Blood streamed down his face from a gash above his eyebrow. When he saw me, relief flooded his features. "Mary, thank God! They're after you, after both of us." "Who?" I looked at James. "Who did this?" James's expression was carved from ice. "The Kurova family. I've been expecting this." He nodded to his security team. Then he looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Calculation mixed with regret. "Your father didn't just own an antique shop, Mary. He laundered money for the Kurovas for 15 years. When he died, they lost their pipeline. They've been looking for leverage to force you to continue his work." The world tilted. "That's impossible." "Your father made compromises to survive, just like you signed that contract with me." James's voice was cold, factual. "The Kurovas don't care about your innocence. They care about their money. And now that you're under my protection, I've become their target too." I felt sick. My father's legacy wasn't honorable. It was built on blood money. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you compliant. I needed you here where I could control the situation." He stepped closer. "The Kurovas have been circling for months. I didn't bring you here out of revenge, Mary. I brought you here to use you as bait." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. All his attention, his fascination, it was manipulation, a game. Marcus groaned. "They said they'd kill me if I didn't bring you to them. 48 hours. James made a call, then looked at Marcus with cold assessment. "You're going to tell me everything, every word they said, every face you saw." "They'll kill him," I protested. "They'll kill him anyway." James's honesty was brutal. But I saw something else too, the way his team moved with precision, the planning behind his eyes. James Vane was preparing for war, and I was the reason it was coming. They took me 3 days later. Mrs. Chen asked me to retrieve something from the garage. The moment I stepped through the door, hands grabbed me from behind, a cloth pressed over my mouth, chemicals sweet. The world went dark. I woke in a warehouse that smelled of oil and decay, zip-tied to a metal chair. 3 men stood around me. The oldest one, with gray hair and a scar down his cheek, crouched in front of me. "Mary Flynn, your father owed us. Now you owe us." "I don't owe you anything." He slapped me, the crack echoing through the warehouse. I tasted blood. "Your father's debt is your inheritance. You'll launder our money, or we'll burn down everything James Vane loves, starting with you." They left me alone in the dark. Hours passed. I thought about James, his cold calculation. Part of me hoped he wouldn't come, that he'd cut his losses. But I knew better. James Vane didn't lose. When the warehouse doors exploded inward, it was with gunfire and systematic violence. James walked through the chaos like death incarnate, flanked by men moving with military precision. The Kurovas soldiers fell like dominoes. James shot the man who'd slapped me twice, once in each kneecap. His screams filled the warehouse as James walked past without a glance, his eyes locked on me. He cut through my zip ties, his movements gentle despite the carnage. "Can you walk?" I nodded, too shocked to speak. He led me through the warehouse, stepping over bodies like furniture. Outside, more of his men secured the perimeter. A massacre dressed as rescue. In the SUV, I found my voice. "You killed them." "Not all of them. The ones I left alive will carry a message." He looked at me, eyes empty of remorse. "This is who I am, Mary. The man you called pathetic in that alley.
This is what that word bought you. I should have been horrified. Instead, something shifted inside me. James Vane was brutal and calculating and dangerous, but he'd walked into a war zone to get me back. Not because I was useful, because he was mine. I was wrong, I whispered. Surprise flickered across his face. That night in the rain, I was wrong about you. You're not pathetic. You're terrifying.
We didn't go back to the estate. James took me to a penthouse in the heart of the city, a place no one knew about. Smaller, but more intimate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline. He poured us both whiskey. My hands shook, but I drank. The burn helped ground me. "The Koravas will retaliate," I said. "Let them try. After tonight, they know the cost of touching what's mine." He sat beside me on the leather couch, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning, about your father, about why I really brought you to the estate. You said you wanted to make me regret insulting you." "I did," he smiled, but it was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "That night in the rain, when you laughed at me, I saw something I'd forgotten existed. Courage without calculation, fire without fear. You looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster. And I've been obsessed with that moment ever since." I set down my glass. "You destroyed my life." "I did, and I'd do it again, because it was the only way to keep you close long enough to understand." He cupped my face, his thumb tracing the bruise on my cheek. "You called me pathetic, and I wanted to prove you wrong. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about revenge. It became about not wanting to let you go." I should have pulled away, should have told him that admitting obsession didn't excuse manipulation. But I was tired of fighting, tired of pretending I hadn't felt the pull between us every time he looked at me.
"I regret those words," I said finally. "Not because you made me, because they weren't true. What would you call me instead?" I thought about the man who'd walked through gunfire to save me, the man who'd given me a beautiful prison and somehow made me want to stay, the man who'd turned my life upside down and become the only stable thing in it. "Mine," I whispered. He kissed me, and it wasn't gentle. It was possession and surrender wrapped into one desperate moment. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, and for the first time since that night in the rain, I saw James Vane without his armor. "I'll clear your father's debts, give you back the shop. You can leave if you want. I won't stop you." I laughed, the same sharp sound from that night in the alley, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was defiance of a different kind. "You really think I'd walk away now, after you've shown me exactly what kind of monster you are? Then what do you want, Mary?" I looked out at the city lights, at the world that had tried to break me and failed, then back at the man who'd torn my life apart and put it back together in his image. "I want to stand beside you, not as your prisoner or your pawn, as your equal, as someone just as dangerous as you are when I need to be." I smiled, sharp as his. "You wanted to make me regret my words. Instead, you made me regret ever thinking I wanted a simple life." James pulled me into his lap, his arms wrapping around me like chains I had no interest in breaking. "Welcome to the dark, Mary Flynn. I hope you're ready for what comes next." I kissed him again, tasting whiskey and blood and the strange, intoxicating freedom that came from choosing the monster instead of running from him. Outside, the city glittered like a battlefield waiting to be won.
For the first time since that rain-soaked night when I'd called him pathetic, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, in the arms of the man who destroyed me just to rebuild me in his image, the man I'd insulted and underestimated, the man who'd made me regret my words by teaching me to regret nothing at all.